2009 was the year of blue aliens, blind sides, and bombs over Baghdad at the 82nd Annual Academy Awards. The Hurt Locker diffused Avatar's golden dreams while Kathryn Bigelow made history, and Sandra Bullock pulled off the rare Oscar-Razzie double feature. Christoph Waltz made drinking a glass of milk the most horrific thing in cinema. This was a ceremony where the Academy tried to please everyone, yet still managed to surprise us all. On this month's Oscars retrospective, I'm joined by my dear friend Cody Dericks as we dive into the Academy Awards of 2010. Well, thanks for coming back, dude. So we're,
of course.
I just started doing these Oscars retrospectives, and it's kind of funny because, like, for me, when you go we're right there tonight because 2010 up until now, 2025, I'm pretty almost muscle memory can kind of tell you what was happening in those years.
Sure.
But then pre-2010, it's foggy, and then even the further you go back, it's even more foggy. But then when I see it or I watch clips or I even go to the Oscars website, it kind of jars my memory a little bit. Oh yeah, that's where I was, or that was what I was doing. So it's funny that you picked this one because this is the first one that was a little foggy for me until I looked it up, and I was like, oh, okay. This was the Kathryn Bigelow year. This was the, and I kind of remember different moments from it.
First Best Picture 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to get into all that tonight. So we are discussing the 2009 in film, which was the 2010 Academy Awards. I got my buddy Cody here.
Yep.
Why'd you pick this one, man? So I'm letting the guests pick the year, and obviously there's 97 to choose from. So why did you go for 2010? What is it about this year that made you want to talk about it?
So there's a few reasons. Personally, it was my freshman year of college, and it was the first Oscars that I ever watched where I had seen all the Best Picture nominees before the ceremony. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, so seeing the films before they were awarded at the Oscars was sometimes hard, if not impossible. And then going to college in a more metropolitan area, it became suddenly possible to see everything. And also, it being the first year of 10, it made it more exciting to kind of check everything off the list.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I was going to ask, and you can go ahead and give me your basic answer now, if you think that was a good move based on what's happened since then, or are you a purist that is maybe that's overkill because obviously there's only one winner, so what do you think?
I feel a few ways about it. I do think it's a good thing. I think recognizing more films in general is good on the Academy's part. It has made it perhaps easier for Academy members to include films from diverse perspectives and viewpoints and mediums. We've seen more films directed by women or people of color, or in the case of this year and the next year, animated films, in a way that was not really very much on the Academy's radar before this. And that also has to do with changing tastes in Hollywood films that get made, etc. But I think it goes a little bit hand in hand. It's kind of hard to tell chicken or egg here. But I do think, and especially with this year, we'll talk about it, it does make the Academy a little bit nearsighted in terms of the films that they consider Oscar worthy, because this year I think we can pretty much conclude very easily which films would be the nominees in a year of 5 and which were kind of the extraneous add-ons. And I think what's happened recently in the past few ceremonies is Academy voters who are famously, I'd charitably say, lazy, have trouble looking for films beyond those considered in Best Picture in other categories. Best Picture nominees outweigh non-Best Picture nominees in the craft categories, in the acting categories, and the writing categories today in a way that they didn't before the category got expanded, or at least before it became de rigueur, because even with this year, there's plenty of movies in the craft categories that were not Best Picture nominees. And I do kind of miss that.
That's true. One thing that's interesting, that I think is interesting about it, and I think it's basically been a trend, what I'm about to say, up until this past Oscar. So it's really been, 15 years of this. But I think it did create a nice bridge from the Prestige, I have my pinkies out, sipping my hot tea, 1,000 people saw it, it wasn't a big thing, to that bridge to a more general audience blockbuster, oh, I've heard of that. at least, like Avatar, The Blind Side, District 9 got nominated this year, which was kind of
Up,
crazy. I don't
yeah.
think that would have, that definitely wouldn't have been in a 5-year. 2010 Oscars was the 82nd Academy Awards. Obviously, for 2009 films, it aired on ABC. Like, I don't know, has it ever not aired on ABC? Do you know the answer to that? I actually feel like every time I look it up, it's ABC.
In my entire lifetime, it's been on ABC.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Yeah.
But in the past 34 years, yes, ABC.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an interesting thing to, maybe I'll find out when I do some more of these retrospectives. But every time I look it up, I'm like, oh, it was on ABC that year as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was March 7th of 2010. It aired. And like we already said, it was the first year that the Academy did 10 nominees for Best Picture. What I wanted to ask you about that we haven't touched on quite yet is, would you be game for it being multiple nominees in the other categories, particularly like acting and director?
No.
No. Okay.
Hard no. Nope.
What is the mentality there? Because I am curious about that. Because who is it? Is it the Film Independent that does like 15 nominees, like lead performer? Or
yeah,
something like that?
they gender neutralized it and expanded it to 10. The Globes do 6. Critics' Choice, I don't know what the hell they're doing.
I don't either.
I don't
I don't think they know.
And then other ceremonies that are not for movies, like Emmys and Tonys, and I can't speak for the Grammys, but I imagine them, have kind of a sliding scale based on how many percentage of votes certain nominees get. I don't like that. 5 is clean, 10 is clean. I also didn't like when the Academy did that weird, it could be anywhere from allegedly 5 to 10, but it was always 8 or 9.
Yeah, I was trying to remember, because I know The Dark Knight had a lot to do with that, and there was a big outcry that it didn't get nominated for
and
picture.
WALL-E, yeah.
And WALL-E, yeah. So I remember that being part of the conversation, and I remember as a fan back then being excited, oh, okay, they're going to nominate more stuff. That's going to be great. Movies like The Dark Knight won't have as much of an issue now. But at the same time, it was strange, because it was like, is it 7? Is it 9? Like, what? And I can't really remember what the algorithm was for it.
I got you. So
okay, all right, go for it. Tell me.
For this year and the next year, so the years that Hurt Locker wins and the year that King's Speech wins, it is a set 10, which is what it is today. And then for the 2012 ceremony, the 2011 films, which is the artists, all the way through the 2021 ceremony. I'm just going to use the Best Picture winner because it's easier. The Nomadland year. That was the sliding scale, where there was some sort of mathematical equation that's dictated based on percentage of votes received, how many Best Picture nominees there were. And again, it could be anywhere between 5 and 10. It was kind of shown that it was mathematically impossible for it to be 10.
Were they doing long list, short list back and all that stuff too?
They were doing some short lists, not as many as we have today.
Okay.
But it was always 8 or 9 in all those years. It was never any different number. Never less than 8, never more than 9.
But I agree with you, because I think the 5 is clean, and it's the individual performance. Well, it should be the individual performance. Obviously, a lot of other stuff goes into when people get nominated too. But for the most part, you're nominating their individual performance. Whereas the picture, obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's going into that, and technical stuff, direction. So it makes more sense that there would be additional nominees, because as a project, maybe there's not one standout performance, but maybe it's still a really terrific movie, that should be honored. So, but I know you mentioned you were in college. You said freshman in college, right?
Freshman year, yep.
So I was going to ask where you were in 2009, but were you in college is great, but were you like you are now in terms of the Oscars? Were you like filling out ballots and like, this person's going to win because of this? And okay, all right.
I've been doing that since I was in middle school. And I even remember before I was old enough to watch the Oscars to their finish, I would the next morning wake up and be like, oh, Shakespeare in Love won. I don't know what that is, but now I know it won Best Picture.
yeah, it's a Best Picture winner. Man, thanks for bringing that up. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Our host this year, we did have a host, which when Jonathan picked, there was no host the year of 2020, but 2010 we had hosts. 2 of them, Alec Baldwin and Steve Martin, co-hosted together. Real quick, did you have any popular bits of theirs or jokes that you enjoyed, or what did you think overall of their hosting gig, and especially in relation to other hosts?
I have no memory of them. I
Oh, wow.
remember
Okay.
them being kind of underwhelming. I know there was a lot of excitement because Steve Martin had done a good job hosting before, and Alec Baldwin was on a really hot streak with 30 Rock. He could not win awards for that. His performance was widely celebrated, and I remember it being kind of just a dud. I don't remember much about their hosting gig at all.
I'm kind of with you. I watched some highlights and saw some different things that they had done, that jokes they made. And they did that thing which I personally hate when the host, Jimmy Kimmel did it a lot too, when the host just literally goes around the room and picks a person and then makes fun of them or calls something
Like a
out about
roast.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just is just picking people and roasting them. Like when Conan, hosted this past year, which I loved his hosting gig. He might say something or take a dig at somebody, but it would be built into a story or a joke that he was already telling. You know what I mean? He wasn't just pointing at people in the room and telling jokes. Did you have any favorite moments aside from the envelope opening, or anything that you remembered about this ceremony that wasn't to do with the winners?
So I do remember, for some reason, the most memorable part of the night was the presentation of Best Original Score, because they did a interpretive dance montage of all the nominees, and I remember it being very odd but strangely compelling. There's still footage
Right.
out there somewhere of it. I watch it every now and then just to kind of go wow, what were they doing? But in a fun way. It reminds me of those moments from the 70s and 80s ceremonies where they'll have, a fashion show for best costume design, or again, a dance number, which is silly, but it's entertaining, and I tune into these shows to be entertained.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of highlights of this show, and like I told you, I had to kind of start jarring my memory a little bit when you picked this year, and it was great to go down that memory lane, because then it did start to kind of be a little less fuzzy for me. But a lot of the memories of this show in particular were about the movies and about the wins, or in some cases the losses,
Mm-hmm.
if depending on who got snubbed or who lost. But it was very it was an interesting year where there wasn't a lot of pop culture zeitgeisty moments. Does that make sense? There was nothing. There was no Moonlight moment. There was nobody falling down the steps. There was no, nothing from this Oscar ceremony, at least that I can recall, that it's kind of lived on. Let's talk about the year in film, 2009, real quick, before we see what the Academy did with that year. So, box office that year, one of the Best Picture nominees was actually the most successful U.S. box office film, and that was Avatar.
Oh, I thought you were going to say An Education. Was it Avatar? Are you sure about that one? Do you want to double check that?
The Education, yes. My God, it made $463. Avatar, so top of the box office. Then it was followed up by two non-Oscar films, although Harry Potter may have had a technical nomination.
It did. Best cinematography nomination.
Yeah. So Transformers Revenge of the Fallen made $402 million, so almost a pretty far cry from Avatar, almost half of what that one made. And then
That's always my go-to answer for worst film I've ever seen. Besides the obvious ones like The Room and things like that. It's really just abominable.
At least you can enjoy The Room. I don't see how you can enjoy The Fallen. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince would have come in third that year with $302 million at the U.S. box office. The highest-grossing Oscar nominee that was not Avatar, because as you joked with me, that is obviously super obvious, would be The Blind Side, actually. $256 million, which kind of surprised me when I was writing my notes out here. I remember it being a success, and everybody was talking about it, and obviously Sandra Bullock, benefited on this night. But were you surprised by that box office number? Do you remember that being that successful at the box office?
My memory of The Blind Side is seeing a trailer for it before something, probably based on release, like Inglourious Basterds or District 9, because I believe those were late summer and Blind Side was Christmassy. I might be wrong about that. And thinking, well, that looks terrible. And
right.
It was, and it is. But it is the kind of movie that I think really tapped into a market that was not being specifically served by Hollywood Republicans. And we would see films of that ilk explode in the years to come. And now it's the thing of you look at the box office every now and then currently, and you go, what is that movie that's in sixth place? I've never heard of this. Oh, it's a faith-based film. Got it. And this is, I think, a similar sphere of audience engagement.
And the argument with The Blind Side, I'm not going to accuse that movie of being the one that kind of started this trend or whatever, but that's the white savior story too. I mean, which you could fast forward to Green Book. And I mean, the Oscars haven't fully let go of that kind of desire to be an ally for these different types of kind of faux justice films, if you will. Those 4 films that we just mentioned for the box office with Avatar, the Transformers film that we both hated, Harry Potter's installment that year, which was The Half-Blood Prince, and then The Blind Side. Those 4 films, do you think that's an accurate kind of snapshot of the year in film, 2009? Do you think that kind of speaks to the year as a whole?
I really do think so.
Yeah.
You have 2 films in there that are franchises, which kind of is now all we got, really, when comes to big box office, IP, if you will. We have something that taps into a semi-niche market. I guess not niche, but underserved with The Blind Side. And then you have Avatar, which classic sci-fi blockbuster.
There were some pretty big news things. I usually just kind of look up a few, and then I was going to see if you had any that stood out to you that are not these. And I want to see what your memory of these were. I can pretty vividly remember all of these events, but a couple I wanted to point out to you. So obviously Michael Jackson died in June of 2009, which was a pretty sudden passing from what I recall. I looked up a couple of the news stories on YouTube. He was only 50, which, by the way, I turned 50 this year, so that's crazy to think about. And something that I didn't even know until I was making the notes for the show, or I had forgotten it, I guess, was that the memorial was viewed by 2.5 billion people around the globe when they televised his memorial service. Do you remember where you were when you found out Michael Jackson died? Were you a fan of his? Did it matter to you? Or
I do remember where I was. I was in my parents' house because I lived there, and specifically, he died 2 days before my 18th birthday.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
That's a very
hard to forget that.
Exactly. And I remember the funeral because I remember watching it on TV at my summer job at Dunkin' Donuts in New Jersey. It was on the TV in the store, and we and all the customers were watching it. Yeah.
Everywhere. I remember hearing it, and I was working in the restaurant business at the time, so it was like a bar that had like TVs with sports and stuff, and it was for like 3 or 4 days. No games would play, no sport. It was just like all Michael Jackson, and they might have like Sports Center, and then they come back and it's Michael Jackson. I mean, it was just like everywhere. And I remember initially for like a brief 2 or 3 minute period, I was working in a busy restaurant when I found out. And I remember for like a couple minutes, I was like, that's not real. There's no way. And I just kept doing what I was doing. I just didn't even register with me that would be a real fact. You mentioned it already. I'm a huge Swiftie. I think you know that about me, but I always have been. I still love her. I mean, I know it's weird, but I do. And my daughter's a big fan. But Kanye West, this is the year, it was in September of 2009, at the VMAs, which were pretty prominent in that 2000s, mid-2000s area. It was a pretty big deal, at least more so than I feel like it is now. But Taylor Swift had won one of the big awards for the night, and she was up against Beyonce. And she beat Beyonce in that category. I apologize, I can't remember the category. It was like Video of the Year or something like that, one of the big ones.
Female performance, I think. She beat Single Ladies. Yeah.
There you go. And I love Beyonce, so I'm not saying anything bad about her. But Kanye West, who was tight with Beyonce and Jay-Z and the whole thing, comes running up on stage and has the infamous, I'm going to let you finish, but, Beyonce's the female artist, whatever I'm paraphrasing, but, whatever he said. And Taylor's just kind of standing there. She's pretty young in her career at this point. I mean, I don't know her age at the time, but she was probably 2009. She was probably 20.
Well, if she was born in 1989, as her album is famously titled.
That's right, 89. That's right.
20, right? Yeah.
At 20, yeah. So,
and that's math.
I mean, I nailed it. I was guessing and I nailed it. So I am a Swiftie. I told you. What did you think of this? Did you see this live, or did you find out about it after the fact?
I remember this happening, yes. I was watching the VMAs in a college dorm room, which is kind of the ideal place to watch the VMAs, I feel like. And it was not only that, and I remember it happening, and we all were watching it going, is this real? Is this a bit? Kind of similar to the same feeling I had with the Will Smith slap. What's going on? Is this real? Is this actually happening?
It does seem unreal, yeah.
Because I also remember that was the same VMAs where Lady Gaga performed Paparazzi, which locked me in as a fan. And she's my girl since the day. I'm seeing her in a month.
So good.
So big important award ceremony.
I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Anything from 2009 that you remember as a freshman in college that I don't have listed here? Any pop culture moments you want to talk about?
The biggest thing that I can remember otherwise, and this isn't pop culture exactly, although it kind of bridged the gap into all aspects of culture, was obviously Obama getting inaugurated in January.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I was still in high school, and I remember us gathering in the cafeteria to watch it on a TV probably the size of the laptop I'm currently recording
Man, I know it was '08 when we found out he won.
Mhm.
But I tell you, man, I've been a Democrat my whole life, so I mean, it could have been anybody, right? I'd probably been okay. But the fact that it was Obama, I just remember I was so cynical at the time. And I was telling myself, and I would have conversations with my wife, and we listened to NPR and all that shit. And I just remember the whole time thinking, America's going to let us down. Like, they're not going to
Yeah.
elect a black man. It's just, they're not ready to do that. The country's too red. Like, and I just literally thought that until he won. Like, I just cynically thought that, you know what I mean? So then to have it happen was just so euphoric, man. I was like floating on a high. I know that's a separate year from, because I found that was November, right? November of '08.
Yeah,
So.
November.
Yeah, so that was a big deal, man. That was a good one to shout out. And that was a cultural moment, too. I mean, you said it wasn't pop culture, but it really is. Because Obama transcended, like, maybe Clinton, you could say, in the 90s. But other than that, I mean, he's really the only president I can think of that's, like, kind of a president and a celebrity. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of did both.
I mean,
so.
To your point, and to connect our points of interest here, Michelle Obama presents the Best Picture winner in, 2 years, 3 years after this for Argo.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Well, let's get into the 2010 Oscars, what we're here to talk about. So there's really one huge story from the Academy Awards, and we'll start with Best Picture because that's really what it's going to kind of lead into other dominoes down the awards conversation here. But The Hurt Locker was a big winner. I think it won 6 Academy Awards that night.
6, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so pretty big ones, obviously, picture and director being the two that I really want to spend some time on here at the top. So The Hurt Locker is obviously your winner. The other nominees were Avatar, The Blind Side, District 9, and Education, Inglourious Bastards, Precious, A Serious Man, Up, and Up in the Air. Why'd they do 2 ups? I hate they did that to me. But those were your nominees. Now, in looking at that group, Cody, this is obviously your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think The Hurt Locker was the one that was able to come out on top there? And who do you think the stoutest competition for it was?
The funny thing about The Hurt Locker is that it came out in the summer of 2009 and was not a hit. I think it even premiered at some film festivals in late 2008, so it had been around for a while. It was extremely highly regarded by critics, and it did very well with Critics' Awards. And it kind of became a thing of, I think we can actually get a woman to win Best Director this year. And I think that momentum, along with the just general unvarnished appreciation of the film quality-wise, went hand in hand and eventually carried it to Best Picture. I remember at the time, I think it was the lowest grossing Best Picture of all time, which is, I'm sure it's been succeeded by now, by many films that have won Best Picture since. But yeah, and I think it's also a case of people were excited to vote for it, as opposed to the stiffest competition, to answer your other question, is obviously Avatar. It's very clearly number 2. It wins the Globes. It is the kind of huge success that the Academy could not ignore. And much like the previous film that was the highest grossing of all time, Titanic, which was directed by the same guy, which got a ton of Oscars thrown at it. And this time, though, I think people were a little bit more excited to vote for the little guy, especially because there was the extra element of, did you know James Cameron and Kathryn Bigelow used to be married? And so it made it feel like your vote for The Hurt Locker was a vote in the right direction, whatever that means.
We didn't mention the, Cameron Bigelow kind of like custody battle over the Oscar this year. That's kind of cool,
Yeah,
and we could arguably get it again this year, depending on how her Netflix film hits. I don't. What's it called again?
House of Dynamite.
House of Dynamite. Yeah, depending on that how that hits. But I don't doubt her. Because especially with movies like this, The Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, and if that's going to be another kind of interpretation of her vision of whatever wartime thing she's focusing on, I mean, she's fucking great at it. You know what I mean? Like, that's obviously something that she has a strong hold on. When we're looking at precursors, and I want to ask about you, because you said you've been doing predictions since middle school. So do you remember if you predicted The Hurt Locker, or did you predict Avatar, or what did you think?
I predicted The Hurt Locker. I got it correct. I do remember this very distinctly because at the time, my then boyfriend was convinced it was going to be Avatar. Mm-hmm. And I smugly was telling him he was wrong, and I was ultimately correct. I think he was holding on to the box office success, and Avatar was like it was definitely still in theaters at the time. I remember when Avatar passed Titanic, it was a big deal. But at the same time, the momentum just really felt like Hurt Locker. And as we've learned since then, nothing is better for your Oscar success than positive momentum, being in the right place in the race at the right time.
If you think about it in terms of like where we've gone 15 years forward, how the mindset, depending on who you are, especially if you're one of the voters, as to what's more accessible, because you mentioned the term lazy, which is one way to put it, and what's more accessible versus what's quote unquote better in terms of like the quality, the content. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, are you following and going with the masses? Like, oh my God, everybody loves Avatar. It's like a technical marvel. I can't believe how great it looks, or are you one of those people that like, this is cinema, like what Kathryn Bigelow did, and like paying homage to the military guys that were involved in that story, and whatever. So it's interesting to see like I wonder what the split was, is basically what I'm saying. Like, I wonder how close it would have been, because you got to imagine the diversity in the Academy voters was probably a pretty even split, I would think. But to your point, the Obama era being brand new and fresh probably helped this movie, I would think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I do think at the same time there was a strange element of, Avatar already got rewarded by the box office. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there was a need to give it Best Picture on top of the box office, whereas something like The Hurt Locker, voters discovering it on their own could maybe also feel a little bit, excited on their own behalf that they discovered the smaller film that can take down Avatar. And Avatar, even though it was a success, it was already getting some backlash. People were critiquing the screenplay, they were critiquing the story not being original, all that sort of stuff that you hear thrown at it all the time.
I don't have it available to confirm, but I'm almost positive I picked it too, just for no other reason, just based on the precursors. I pulled that up as well, and it won the Hurt Locker won the BAFTA. It won the PGA, WGA, and DGA. We're good. It pulled the Anora from this year, which when that happened, I'm like, all right, well, Anora's Best Picture. I don't know what you guys are doing, why you're even not considering that being the case. But I mean, I'd stay with it forever. So Critics' Choice.
It won.
It didn't have SAG Ensemble, though. That was. It didn't have the SAG, right? I think that was maybe the only thing.
No, SAG went to Inglourious Bastards. Which makes sense. Big cast. But Hurt Locker, Critics' Choice won only Best Picture, Best Director.
Precursor-wise, it was looking good, and it ended up happening, obviously. Do you think the Hurt Locker's win, being I think it's fair to call it a modern wartime film, has it changed the Oscars landscape since its win, do you think?
I don't really think it has. If we're talking subject matter, not really. I do think, it would be slow to get to the point we're at today, but it made it easier for Oscar voters to vote for women in Best Director, or female-directed films in general. We wouldn't see another female winner until Nomadland, I believe, is the next one. And there's been, Dean Campion one after that. But we're now at the point where every year, basically, we get at least one female nominee for Best Director. It's hard to tell if that would not have happened without Kathryn Bigelow, but she certainly paved the way. In terms of the movie itself, though, I don't really know if it changed much about how Oscar voters vote, because
I agree.
The next two winners are very typical Oscar wins.
I agree.
Even back films.
Yeah, right. Even nomination-wise, you don't see a whole lot of like, oh, that's like the Hurt Locker. You know what I mean? Like, you don't really see. I mean, you see war films, but they're usually period pieces or like historical settings, as opposed to like modern warfare. Speaking of warfare, I mean, we had that movie this year from Alex Garland and Mendoza, but I mean, even though I think that's an Oscar-worthy film, that would be probably the closest thing, if it were to get nominated, something like that would be kind of in that Hurt Locker subgenre, And I don't think we've really seen a lot of those as far as Oscar nominees go.
No, and not even in terms of non-Oscar landscape. Iraq war movies are not really something people are interested in, public or critically otherwise. This is, off the top of my head, the only one I can think of that has any sort of legacy. Unlike in the 70s when Vietnam films were just extremely popular with audiences, critics, and the Oscars. That's not been the case with the Iraq War for whatever reason.
I'm kind of learning in real time as you're talking that you're right, because I'm going through it in my mind at least the last 10 to 15 years, and I'm like, because some of the movies I can think of were not prestigious. I mean, what was that American Sniper thing with Bradley Cooper was in? That
Oh
was
yeah, American Sniper.
that
I
was
forgot about
kind
that
of a
one.
player, I
I
guess.
guess that one counts. Yeah, it's not very well regarded, obviously, but
No,
it did
right. It
get
was kind of a weird
Oscar
nomination. Yeah.
nominations. Yeah.
I really liked My Dead Friend Zoe that came out this year, but I mean that won't be an awards player. But there's not a
I didn't see
lot.
that one.
It's pretty good. It deals more with PTSD. There's not like a lot of like wartime action in it, but it's more of like the aftermath of it. But it's the Afghanistan war. So the last thing I want to ask you about Best Picture before we go on to talk about probably the biggest thing from this award season, which was Kathryn Bigelow's victory. But do you think in 2025, or I guess what would be 26, do you think The Hurt Locker would win Best Picture if it came out this year and was nominated?
I think it could. Obviously, that depends on a lot of different factors, competition and such, but I don't think there's much about this movie that has aged poorly in Academy's eyes. I have personally some notes about it. I still think it's a good
Okay.
movie. I don't know if I regard it with as much excitement as I did when I first saw it. Like Academy voters, I saw it around voting time and was kind of blown away by the vision of it. And then upon
Yeah.
rewatching recently, I was less impressed with it. And I don't know if that's
Mhm.
just films I've seen since or my
That's the
personal
thing.
changing taste. But this film doesn't really get talked about very much in
It's
circles that
crazy.
we're
It
in.
doesn't.
I,
It
and
really
or
doesn't.
in the general public, really. I mean, Hurt Locker as a term, I guess, is something that people talk about, but nobody really even knows what that means. It's
Yeah.
just not really had a huge impact outside of Kathryn Bigelow's victory.
So we're going to shift to Best Director. Obviously, we've been talking about it a little bit already, but Kathryn Bigelow obviously wins for Best Director in addition to Best Picture and the other awards that it received on the night. She was the first woman to ever be awarded Best Director, and that was at the time in an 82-year history. Even with that win, though, she was only the fourth woman up until that point to receive a nomination. Which is fucking crazy to me at 82 years. Now, since her win, and then I want to kind of open it up to you a little bit of what this meant to you and how you remember it, but since her win, we've had 6 additional women nominated, which would be in the last 15 years, and 2 of them have won. They were Greta Gerwig, Chloe Zhao, which you mentioned for Nomadland, Emerald Fennell, Jane Campion, who was a previous nominee, one of the 3 that came before Bigelow, Justin Triet, and Coralie Farja last year for The Substance. Jane Campion and Chloe Zhao being the 2 additional winners post Bigelow. So obviously a better track record. This kind of seems to be trending in the right direction. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to not make this a leading question, but I guess I really just kind of want your commentary on what your thoughts are on the history of women in the director category, basically.
No, I got you. So the thing is, it's twofold. Like, yes, we obviously can look at the Academy askance for their lacking representation here. We also cannot lose sight of the fact that you can't nominate movies and therefore directors that don't exist. And part of the problem is that Hollywood was so reticent to give women the chance to direct films for a long time. A long time. To the point where you had to be, somebody of such a high status as like Barbara Streisand at the top of her, celebrity to get it even made. Or there's smaller cases, directors like Elaine May who wrote her own movies, things like that. Obviously, there's stuff in the indie sphere, or there's Agnes Varda, foreign directors, but a lot of times there were not women directors to nominate, which is more damning of Hollywood than anything.
Absolutely.
So and I believe it took a while for them to even recognize films directed by women outside of Best Director. I believe the first Best Picture nominee directed by a woman was Children of Lesser God in 1986. So it's not like they were reticent to award them in this category only. It was all categories. And, that trickles on down to all the other crafts categories. We got our first ever female nominee in Best Cinematography less than a decade ago with Mudbound. Obviously, it took a long time for the Oscars to get to the point where they were giving a woman Best Director, and we've seemed to have, I would say, by comparison, corrected the course. But at the same time, I can't put the blame entirely on the Academy when there were just not as many options when it came to films directed by women to even nominate in the first place.
It's a more shallow pool that you're pulling from, for sure.
Correct.
And I agree with you.
Yes.
That's what I was trying not to lead you there, but I'm
Yeah.
saying because that's actually how I feel too. When Barbara Streisand presented the Best Director award at this Oscars, which obviously went to Kathryn Bigelow, when she comes out, Did you rewatch that, or do you remember that at all?
Yes, I did. I remember this, and I rewatched it.
Okay, yeah, I rewatched it. I didn't remember it. I rewatched it. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But she comes out and she basically says what we were just kind of saying about, 82 years, maybe we could have a first, And at the time, I didn't remember it anyway. But in watching the thing back, I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe she did that, because what if James Cameron would have won? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it seemed weird to basically prep everybody for a historical thing that could or could not have happened. Which, when I was rewatching it back yesterday, I was thinking of the Chadwick Boseman, Anthony Hopkins thing that they messed up. Was kind of similar to me, my perception of that. Did you remember that? Was that weird, or do you think Barbra Streisand knew? I mean, she couldn't have known, right?
Well, here's the thing. I think, sorry to my ex-boyfriend, but I think we all knew that the writing was on the wall and this was going to Kathryn Bigelow. The closest competition was James Cameron. He had won already. And to my earlier point, the movie, as they said on Mad Men, that's what the money's for. That had already gotten so much accolades from the box office. It is really scary, though, and if I were a producer of the Academy, I would be quite nervous when they set up these potential winners. It was similar to when Scorsese won, and they had all his friends present him Best Director. I think it was Spielberg, George Lucas, and Francis Ford Coppola, where it's like you're really playing your hand here, and you're being very ballsy. It obviously paid off here, but.
Yeah,
thank God. It would have not been good if it had not.
And they reordered that whole 21 Oscars. They reordered it. Remember, they gave the awards out in the wrong order because they thought Chadwick was going to get the last award of the night.
I remember. Yes, it was very upsetting.
My God, I thought I was in a dream when I was watching that. And that was during the COVID thing, too. There was only 50 people there, It was really weird. That was really, really weird. No clips. I mean, it was just a nightmare ceremony. So let's talk about the supporting roles. We'll start with supporting actor. The nominees that year were Christoph Waltz for Inglourious Basterds, Matt Damon for Invictus, Woody Harrelson for The Messenger, Christopher Plummer for The Last Station, and Stanley Tucci, who I love, but in the movie I did not really love, The Lovely Bones. Christoph Waltz was your winner here for Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds. I thought he had a really cool speech, with the exception of all the focus on Harvey Weinstein. I don't know if you rewatched that acceptance speech, but he kept thanking him. They kept cutting to him in the crowd, and I was like, oh, God.
Part of the problem of watching any Oscar ceremony in the 90s or 2000s.
Didn't age well. What do you think of this category, though? Overall, have you seen all of these films? Because I have not seen, actually, The Messenger. I haven't seen that.
I have not seen Invictus, but I've seen all the other ones. And this category, I would charitably say, is very top-heavy, in that Christoph Waltz is unbelievable in Inglourious Basterds.
So good.
And the other three performances that I've seen, so that's Woody Harrelson, Christopher Plummer, and Stanley Tucci, are less exciting to me, personally. No shade to those actors. They're all actors I like. Especially Stanley Tucci, to your point, is that unfortunate thing of that's his only Oscar nomination. So he's technically an Oscar-nominated actor, but it's for a not good performance in a very not good movie.
Weird.
But Christoph Waltz is so good, and he was so obviously going to win. The two supporting categories this year were like locked. There was no.
I don't remember the precursors for him, but he was sweeping, I think, though, right?
He swept. He swept.
Yeah,
I don't think nobody else won any major awards. Pretty sure he swept the Critics Awards. I don't even know who second place would be. I just don't.
Now, do you think, maybe this is me reaching or just thinking too much, but do you think it's weird, or what do you think about the fact that the Hurt Locker's the big winner on the night, and then you have this really unsavory, kind of disgusting person, Nazi, winning in a major acting? Do you think that's strange, or is that just me just kind of overthinking it?
I don't think it's strange, and especially in this category, supporting actor likes villains. The year before this, they gave it to the Joker, so it's something that they're not afraid to do. And part of the amazing thing about Christoph Waltz's performance is that he is charming in the movie. You're excited whenever he's on screen, even though he's the epitome of evil.
I know.
He also was a discovery. He was not known to audiences, at least not American audiences.
I will say this is a better 5. I've seen all of these, and I think all of these are pretty great. The nominees for supporting actress that year were Monique, who ended up winning for Precious, Penelope Cruz for 9, Vera Farmiga for Up in the Air, Maggie Gyllenhaal for Crazy Heart, and Anna Kendrick for Up in the Air. Two Up in the Air actresses. I remember being surprised when that happened. But what do you think? Monique wins here. Is this your pick? What do you think about this group overall?
Monique is unquestionably the winner for me in this category. It's an
really good,
incredible performance. And similar to Christoph Waltz, she was sweeping. There was no competition. Second place was one of the Up in the Air women. I don't know which one. Maybe Anna Kendrick, because she was, or Vera Farmiga was more well known by voters possibly, but it doesn't matter. She probably, I would fathom to guess that in both supporting categories, the winner may have gotten upwards of like 75% of the vote. It was, I cannot imagine it being close.
Probably similar to this past year. I was going to say with
exactly.
Yeah,
it happens a lot in supporting categories. They can tend to be sweepers for whatever reason.
So I think it was a good group too. And I think Monique, like you said, I mean, aside from the sweeping part of it aside, I mean, not even taking precursors into account, just looking at the performances. I mean, it was such a powerful, moving, memorable, out of body thing that she did. So
it's unreal.
It's unforgettable. So, and looking at the lead categories, I love this win. I want to see what you think. Actor in a leading role, Jeff Bridges. Finally, man, he's got his Oscar for Crazy Heart. The other nominees were George Clooney for Up in the Air, Colin Firth for A Single Man, Morgan Freeman for Invictus, and Jeremy Renner for The Hurt Locker. So a big winner on the night, but not for Renner here. It went to Jeff Bridges for Crazy Heart. I think that was the right call. I loved Bridges in that role. It was, if the casting Oscar had been around this year, I don't know if they may have won for Crazy Heart, because that was like perfect casting for that. What did you think of him in that movie? Are you glad that he won? And what do you think of this group?
I'm glad he has an Academy Award in his house, which is the thing I say when I would not have voted for somebody, but I'm happy that they won.
Okay. Who was your favorite?
I do think he's great, though. And the thing with this category is, like I mentioned before, I haven't seen Invictus, but the other four nominees are all giving like top tier, if not best of their career performances. If George Clooney hadn't already won, this would have been a great Oscar for him. I think he may have even been second place. Colin Firth wins the next year, so he's fine. He's taken care of. Jeremy Renner would probably have gotten my vote, actually. But Jeff Bridges is a great winner. He's great in the movie. He's a great actor, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, he was my pick, obviously. I get what you're saying. I think Renner, too, had the benefit, at least from a predicting standpoint, of like riding that Hurt Locker wave, too. Because, the biggest winner on the night, nominated across the board. So it would have been very easy to be like, yeah, he's gonna go with that. But
he also was kind of the exciting, like, he wasn't exactly a discovery because he'd been working in Hollywood for the better part of a decade, if not longer. But this is unquestionably his breakthrough.
Right, he like crossed over to like that real dramatic turn for sure. So for lead actress, this was a big one. We talked about The Blind Side a little bit already, but I do love me some Sandy B, so I'm a little conflicted. But Sandra Bullock's, I believe, first nomination. I think it was the first time she was nominated, and also her first and only win. So she was the winner for The Blind Side. The other nominees were Helen Mirren for The Last Station, Carey Mulligan, one of my queens, for An Education, Gabourey Sidibe for Precious, and Meryl Streep. What was this, like the 13th time at that point or something? Or 12th?
Probably,
yeah. For Julie and Julia. What do you think of this group? Now, I know we're talking about kind of the problematic aging of The Blind Side. If you can somehow put yourself back in 2009 when Sandra Bullock portrayed that role, and you're just looking at her performance and not like kind of everything that goes with it, what do you think? Is it Oscar worthy? Should she have won this? I tried to set it up so sweet for you to be.
That was very diplomatic of you. No.
All right, go ahead.
No.
All right, so what do you think of this group? Who's your winner here?
So to just give a bit more detail into my dislike of Sandra Bullock's performance here, I embarked on a project following along with Kevin Jacobson's podcast and The Runner-Up Is, where I watched every single nominee for Best Actress. I've seen every single performance that was ever nominated for Best Actress that is not lost.
Oh
and
God.
Of all, because I'm a crazy person, I made a ranked list of all of them.
Sure.
And of the 483 performances that I saw that were nominated for Best Actress, Sandra Bullock ranks number 465. So, No, I do not like her performance. It's one of my least favorite wins in this category. Regardless,
too much of a caricature, or what do you think?
I just don't think it is. Yeah, it's a caricature. It is not invested in either the reality of like our world or any semblance of like unified reality of the movie itself. I also think the movie is horrible. It's one of the worst Best Picture nominees we've
It's not the
ever had.
greatest.
I've seen
It's not the
a lot of
greatest.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is not good. I just don't see much here that is Oscar worthy. I'm sorry, Sandra Bullock, if you're watching, but I just don't think there's much here to reward. I think they were excited about the character. I think voters were excited about Sandra Bullock being a star, and the movie made a lot of money. I don't think anybody was watching this really charitably and honestly saying, this is one of the best performances of the year. This is the best leading actress performance of the year. Absolutely not.
Especially
No
when
way.
you're up against some of those names. I mean, Helen
Yeah,
Mirren,
that's the other
Carey
thing.
Mulligan would have been my pick here, but yeah.
It is not a weak category. This is not one of those years where they kind of default into an okay win because there's not much competition. There's some good nominees here.
One thing that's a funny fact that I saw when I was Googling some stuff to make our show notes is that she won, obviously, the Oscar here for The Blind Side, but in that same year, she won a Razzie for All About Steve. So in the same year, she won a Razzie and she won an Oscar, which is kind of hilarious. It sounds like maybe you would have given her the Razzie for The Blind Side, but I guess the way around. That'd been funny if she was nominated for All About Steve. No,
yeah. Well, and back then they used to do Razzies the night before the Oscars, so it was a thing of like she won the Razzie and then she immediately won the Oscar. Yeah,
that's good. That's good stuff. I'm kind of with you though. That movie is not aged well, and I mean, I remember like the first time I saw it. Like, but again, I'm a sports fan, whereas you are not. So I don't know if that might factor into my enjoyment level, but
possibly,
maybe, I don't know. But I remember the first time I saw it in 2009 or whatever. I remember I liked it, but as time's gone on and as I've reflected on various Oscar wins and this and that, I mean, I'm with you, where I'm just like it's not very good, especially in terms of like awards worthiness, but. I'll do your thing that you did, and I'll just say I'm glad that Sandy B has an Oscar on her mantle.
Yes,
because I am
exactly.
But at the same time, I probably wouldn't have voted for her. It probably would have been Carey Mulligan for me that year. Did you tell me who would get your vote out of this group?
I would have gone with Gabrielle Sidibe.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
But her, I honestly, I do really love Meryl's work in Julie and Julia, and Carey Mulligan is great in An Education. But
yeah, it's a good group. It's a really stout group, Okay, so let's see. So I guess I already know the answer to this. I was going to say, do the winners still feel Oscar worthy today? So I know what you think about Sandy B. What do you think about the others that we just touched on there? So it'd be Christoph Waltz, Jeff Bridges, and then Monique. So do you think all three of them would have won in the 2025 era?
I do think the other three actors for sure would still win. And to that point, the legacy of their wins is pretty good. I don't think many people have very much of a problem with Jeff Bridges' win. At the time, people were really rallying for Colin Firth, but then he wins the next year anyway, so it's kind of like, okay, we figure this out. They could have even done a funny thing where if Colin Firth won this year, maybe Jeff Bridges wins the next year for True Grit because he's nominated again.
I know. Yeah.
And then with Monique and Christoph Waltz, again, those are pretty well-regarded performances. I do think there is a bit of retrospective or retroactive, maybe slight dampening of Christoph Waltz here because people, I think, maybe got a little bit tired of his thing. And his win for Django Unchained 3 years later is kind of weird. He kind of just tumbled into that win almost by default. And it's a lead performance. It's a whole thing. I recently rewatched Inglourious Basterds with that in mind, and I was a little bit worried that I wouldn't be as impressed by his performance because I've seen him do so much other things back then. Like maybe this was just a case of we were excited by the bright, shiny new toy that was Christoph Waltz. But nope, his performance is still incredible. It totally holds up.
I wanted to, we usually just kind of like throw out our favorite technical kind of category from this year in terms of like the group of nominees, collectively, what you think the strongest group was or what your favorite win from one of the technical categories. I'm going to let you pick first so I can pick a different one.
The funny thing is, I don't love this movie, which is maybe unpopular, but I really love the best score win for Up. I think Michael Giacchino's score is unreal. It is, I think, responsible for a lot of the success of that film, including, getting it the nominations it gets. I don't think that happens if, for example, the married life montage at the beginning of the film is not scored as well as it is. And that scene kind of carries the movie through to the Oscars, I would argue. And I love him as a composer in general, so it's a really good win in my book.
That's a good one. We didn't actually touch on it. We can just let everybody know in case they don't know. But Up is one of only two animated movies, right? Or three. What's the third one?
Because Beauty and the Beast gets nominated
Oh, that's
in
right. Beauty and the
91
Beast. That's
when
right.
it was still
Right.
five. Yeah.
Yeah, at the time it was two, right? And then the third one came later, or because Toy Story 3 was
So this was
after.
the second, and then the next year Toy
Right.
Story 3 gets nominated, and that's it. Just those three.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So one of only three animated films to be nominated for the Best Picture. So that was pretty huge. Do you think it'll happen again? It's probably going to happen soon, actually. I would think. With the Boy and the Heron and all that kind of stuff, like that wave is kind of like a flow thing. And
yeah.
What's that? Go ahead.
I have a lot of thoughts about this. So to surmise, I think the problem is the Academy, when it comes to recognizing films in Best Picture, animated films, has a bias towards Disney Pixar. Maybe that's because more voters watch those movies by default. But Disney Pixar's been in a bit of a slump lately. I liked Ilio, but audiences clearly did not go to see it. So I don't think that's getting a Best Picture nomination. So it'll happen again. I don't think before I die, I'm sure at least one more movie will get an animated film in Best Picture, but it's not looking good lately.
So for me, it's kind of a cop-out, but when I was going through the technical categories, there was no group where I was like, oh my God, it's a really, really strong group. Until I saw, and of course they combine it now, but sound editing and sound mixing were separate at the time. And when you look at, because on my screen right now I'm looking at sound editing and it scrolls right into sound mixing, and you look at those 10, you're like, yeah, those are all like very, very well sounded films. I mean, even the Transformers one that we were making fun of, I mean, you can't argue really the sound of a movie like that. Yeah. But The Hurt Locker ended up winning both, which I thought was great. I mean, I think that's a big piece of that movie and why it was so affecting to me when I saw it in the theater. I mentioned Warfare earlier, a very similar example there, or Civil War last year. Like, yeah, I like those movies, but without that sound design being just like A+++, like above and beyond, it may not hit me as hard as it does, you know? And I think The Hurt Locker was one of those examples in the sound category that year. So
for me, the funny thing with sound mixing, sound editing is that back when it was split, I do think Hurt Locker deserved sound mixing. But with sound editing, which is about the construction of sound effects and, creating sounds that are then used in the movie as opposed to the leveling of the sound, I always kind of am more impressed by movies that are creating sounds we never heard. I'm going to be, reductive here and say Hurt Locker has a lot of explosions and gunshots, which you have to collate all those. I get it. But Avatar had to build an entire fictional world, and part of that was the sound. So that would have gotten my vote in that category personally.
Right.
But Hurt Locker,
they're kind of inventing.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
Hurt Locker's a great winner, though. In both
Do you
categories.
like the sound split up like that, or do you like them together?
I'm always in favor of more categories than less, but it does make it kind of. I like the fact that best sound now goes to the mixer and the editor. I like that, but I do think it now. And back in the day, we can pretend that it was nice to have those two separate distinctions, but we saw a lot of bad winners that just took both because clearly the wider academy didn't know the difference. Things like Bohemian Rhapsody. So I don't mind combining them for that reason.
Some of these movies I'm gonna have to talk about on this series I'm doing. It's like this year wasn't too bad actually. Sandy B, I guess, was the worst thing that we had to dive into there, and I love her, so that's okay. The last thing that, of course, I have to touch on it's a kind of a two-parter, but we're going to talk about the wonderful snubs because that comes up every single year. And I always quote my buddy Brian Loy that he said on my podcast like 10 years ago when we were talking about an award show. He said, I don't like using that term because every actor that was in a film that didn't get nominated was technically snubbed. And it stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So he's like, there's like 10,000 snubs and there's only 5 nominees. So, but anyway, it comes up every single year. So that would basically be, somebody that we think was worthy to receive a nomination but didn't, especially when you think of like the Sandra Bullocks of the world that you might not be on board with. So any jump out to you that were snubbed this year that you thought should have been in the nominated field?
So to me, when I hear the word snub, it reads less as like something that just didn't make it in point blank, and more something that seemed to have the trajectory of almost getting in, but at the last minute was suddenly yanked away. Things like
Mm.
Ben Affleck and Best Director for Argo. That's a
Mm-hmm.
snub, where on paper there's no reason that should have happened. But if we're talking things that I would have nominated versus things that, because the funny thing about this year is that I was looking at the like trajectory of the precursors and stuff, and there's not a ton of big, shocking omissions. I guess you
Yeah,
could say
it's
things like,
it's a
um,
weird. I'll say before you say, I think this
yeah,
might be what you're saying is what I was thinking when I was doing my research for it. Is like this is not necessarily like a weak movie year, but it's a weak like Oscar movie year. Like it didn't, does that make sense? Like it didn't feel like a ton of like,
yeah,
oh,
I
that's
hear what you're
Oscar.
saying.
The second part of this, though, before you get too deep, because I want you to try to hold on to the second part, is I want to get your top three films from 2009 that didn't receive any nominations,
Yes,
which is kind
yeah.
of
Let me do
separate
that
from what I'm
first.
talking about. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So the three would be for me my favorite movie of the year, and I have not seen this in a long time, so maybe it would not hold up. But I really love 500 Days of Summer.
That's a good one,
I,
man. That's a good
I
one.
think
That's on my
it's
list
a
too.
really, I think it's a really great deconstruction of the romantic comedy genre and tropes, while still being romantic and funny. And a lot of people misread it as playing into those tropes as opposed to looking at them for what they are. Which I'm maybe being more charitable because I liked the movie, but I lean more towards that read of the film. I also think if we're talking to tie into your first question, I would nominate that in like picture, director, actor, screenplay, maybe even editing. It is a very impressively constructed film. The screenplay is amazing, and it arguably was in the mix, I would say. So we can maybe call that a snub. But my other movies that I really liked from this year, Thirst, which is a vampire movie
Oh yeah, it does Park Chan
from
Wook, right?
Park Chan Wook, exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
fucking love that
who
movie, dude.
kind of is one of those directors who has yet to make a movie that's anything less than at least interesting.
Oh my god, he's
And
so
it's
good.
a
That movie actually made my I can't remember the event that I did. I did it in correlation for something that was Sinners. I did it when Sinners came out. I did my favorite
okay.
vampire
Hmm.
movies, and Thirst was in my top 10. So I love that
Yeah,
movie. I
it's a good one.
revisited it for that list, and I was like, this is still just fucking
It
perfect.
rules. It
Love
rules.
that guy.
And the last one is an animated film. It's Ponyo from Hayao
That's a good one.
Miyazaki.
Yeah, that's a
It's
good one.
a great film that I think should have had more traction in Best Animated Feature. For some reason, it just wasn't even really on the Academy's radar because Secret of Kells gets in, which is a surprise, but it was not in place of Ponyo. It was pretty much predicted that Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs would be the nominee there.
Mhm.
So if it were me, though, I would have put Ponyo in and I would have given it the award.
Well, I'm glad we're becoming friends, Cody, because you class me up a little bit. Because I'm looking at my list and I'm listening to you, and I'm like, Jesus, do I even want to say mine? So, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is on my thing. I fucking love that movie.
Okay,
I
I've
love
actually never
that
seen
film.
it, so
I love it. I love it. People come down on it. I love it. I don't think it should have been the winner, but I would have been pleased with the nomination. I just rewatched it recently. My
Mhm.
6-year-old watched it for the first time, and he loved it. He's
Okay,
trying to figure out does food really fall? And I'm like, no, it's not real. Whatever. So, but then
for
listen, I
now.
know you're a horror guy. You do the Halloweeny thing over there
Mhm.
on the podcast. I know you're the horror guy.
Oh,
Jennifer's
winners, yeah.
Body came out in '09.
Yep.
Drag Me to Hell from Sam Raimi came out.
Drag Me to Hell is my
Uh,
number 4 if we got to do a top 5.
yeah,
I
dude.
love that movie.
And I love a little minimalistic horror is what I'll call it. Kind of a haunted house slash possession film called House of the Devil from Ty West, who is
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
famous the last
Yeah.
couple of years for the X Pearl Maxine trilogy.
Early Greta Gerwig performance.
Yeah, she was good in that too. I was like,
Mhm.
when she popped up, I was like, Greta. Cody, it was great to go down memory lane, talk about this with you. 2010, you're going to come back in a couple months and we'll do 1976. I haven't even looked at that year, but I was born in 75. So
Okay.
it's really, really special to me that you picked that. I hope Jaws showed up at the Oscars that year. I can't, did it? It did, or no? It didn't. It did. Okay, all right, yeah.
It
I
did.
haven't looked
Although
and I
famously
definitely don't
not in
remember.
Best Director. We'll talk about that.
Cody Dericks, you're the man. I love chatting with you and joking around with you on Twitter and listening to you on NBP and all that stuff, man. You're
Thank
one of
you.
my favorites. You came on and really early and like May or something, and we were talking about the 26
Yeah.
nominees together. You were the
I
first
shudder to
person I
look
was
back
able.
on those predictions.
I was first person I was able to brainstorm with, so I really appreciate that too. And I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more over the next several months leading up to the next award season. But I'll be following you and I'll be watching. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? Just tell them what you want to promote.
Totally, yeah. Check out my writing and podcasting at Next Best Picture. I will be going to the Venice Film Festival very soon for them, so I will have lots of fun reviews there. Park Chan-wook, we just brought him up. He has a movie there. Very excited about
choice. Yes.
That's my number one festival so far. And you can follow me all over the internet at CodyMonster91 on every social media platform, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, all that. And you can follow my own podcast, Halloweeners, a horror movie podcast, where my friend and I talk about horror movies on no set schedule and with no pre-planning. It is totally off the dome, just whenever we want to record. Thank you.
It's a lot of fun.
I think so too.
I like it. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm a big horror guy too, so I don't get a chance to talk about it as much as I used to. So I love listening to stuff like that. You do great stuff, man. Cody, you're the best. I appreciate you being here. We're going to be back for another retrospective next month, which will be September. And I'm going to have my lady friend Siobhan on, and we're going to talk about the Oscars of 2001, which would have been the films of the year 2000. So we'll get a little Y2K action on that next retrospective. Cody, I appreciate you being here, man, and I'll talk to you soon. Award season's coming up.
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to be bugging the shit out of you. All right, take care, man.
Bye.